Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today. We're sitting here as I just finished watching the first episode of the Ruthless Aggression documentary mini-series on the WWE Network. This is one of those things that reminds me a lot of the Monday Night War documentary that came out when the WWE Network was first launched. This is something that honestly I think the WWE Network has been lacking. They do have a few shows that pop up now and then, like the 365 or the Chronicle series. That follows just one wrestler telling a certain story, getting from a pay-per-view to a pay-per-view, or 365 covering an entire year. I understand that a lot of work gets put into these documentaries, but it doesn't seem like they come out it doesn't seem like they come out fast enough. So the Ruthless Aggression, I don't know how many episodes this is going to be, but I can honestly tell you that it's off to a pretty good start. Even though the first episode of the Ruthless Aggression documentary series was kind of boring because of the fact that they went over kind of the same old stuff that's been talked about in the history of wrestling, especially by WWE, for a really, really long time. I'm really looking forward to the Ruthless Aggression series because this is a time period in wrestling where basically I turned off my television. It reminds me a lot of the time I'm going through with wrestling right now, where I don't watch Raw, I don't watch SmackDown. I kind of follow wrestling Twitter. I still look at the wrestling sheets and sort of like keep up with the news that is going on in professional wrestling. But as far as like sitting down to watching an entire show to sort of get the feel of the business today, I don't do it. And I can tell you at this time, I had just moved to California. I was, going to work, and I was, as I was waiting to clock out at the time clock every day, I would pick up a WWF magazine and I would look at it. So, a lot of the things that was going on in wrestling, I was following on the internet, but the internet wasn't as good as it is now. There was no YouTube. There was really no videos. Everything was kind of just text, where somebody would just write the show out and you'd have to read it and kind of imagine it in your mind. So I didn't get to see, when WWF changed their name to WWE. I just, that was a time period where basically I was like stepping away. And I don't blame the things that they brought up in this. They said that the wrestling was changing because of the fact that Stone Cold Steve Austin walked out on Monday Night Raw because of the fact that he didn't like the push that his character was getting. He didn't think it made sense to lose to Brock Lesnar clean on an edition of Monday Night Raw with no build, where they didn't build up and pop a number. They weren't doing anything to help the business. They were just doing a job. And Austin basically didn't want to do that. The Rock was going off to make movies. WCW closed, so there was no competition. Those were the sort of excuses why wrestling wasn't as hot as it was the year before. But for me, it just really was, I was getting a little bit older. I think that, I took a priority over getting a real job over, being home to watch a Raw. And to be 100% honest, I think there was a good few months where actually when I moved to California and I moved back in with my dad, we didn't have cable. So I wasn't even able to watch the show if I wanted to. I just wasn't watching it. But we would go over to Grandma's house for Sunday night dinner, and I think we watched a few pay-per-views. Well, at least I watched a few pay-per-views there. I remember seeing the Hogan Undertaker match where Hogan lost the championship. I didn't see the one where he beat Triple H after WrestleMania 17, but I did watch WrestleMania. No, yeah, that's 17. I did watch WrestleMania 17 at my grandma's house as well. And then that was slowly where I faded out. And then when I got an apartment on my own, I did have cable. But, and to tell you the truth, watching Raw wasn't a priority. I can remember sitting down to watch a Monday Night Raw where The Rock and Triple H hosted, or not hosted, but main evented a show. And actually, I was so tired from work in the morning that I fell asleep during the match. The match didn't suck. It wasn't bad. I probably took a commercial, and I fell asleep during the commercial, and immediately woke up and didn't know what happened, and I was pissed. But, that's the time period that we're going through. The stuff that was covered in the first episode of Ruthless Aggression, Volume 1, was basically WCW closing. So they don't have any competition. They're basically going to turn the guys and the girls on the roster against each other. They decide to split the shows. They're going to have Raw. They're going to have SmackDown. And basically, they're going to compete to see who's going to have the better show. Both of them are, pushing to have better ratings. Both of them are pushing to have better live event gate numbers, where Christian was bragging that they went on a tour and the SmackDown tour sold more tickets than the Raw tour. So the guys were in the locker room giving each other high fives. What he said was true. SmackDown was looked at as the B show, even though for the history of time, SmackDown has always been tried to be pushed as the number one show. It's never going to be that because of the fact that I think, in my mind, most wrestling fans have been brainwashed since the history of time with Monday Night Raw first debuting, I believe, in 1993, that Monday Night Raw, you sit your butt in front of the TV on Monday and you watch wrestling. And, SmackDown is bouncing around. I think it's been on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's been on Tuesdays. It's been on every day of the week almost, besides for Mondays and Fridays and Sundays because of pay-per-views. So, I mean, it's been pushed around every corner that it could be. The Stone Cold Steve Austin story, this is one that's been beaten to death. Basically, he walked out on the company. The fans wanted to have Austin back. The Rock went off to make movies. We all wondered when The Rock was coming back. We got used to a time period where we had two real number ones. The WWF has always been supported by guys like Hulk Hogan. He was really lucky to have the Macho Man, and he had, a big, huge, factory of heels as well as baby faces. They had a really good roster during that golden era. It's always going to be looked at as one of the best rosters of all time. But, you think of, being supported by Rock and Austin during the Attitude Era. You got The Undertaker, you got Triple H, you've got Kurt Angle coming on strong right there. So the Attitude Era really had big main eventers and guys that were, if they didn't, weren't number one or number two, they were all fighting to be number 3 and number 4. Nobody wanted to be that number 5 slot. Nobody wanted to get left off the Mount Rushmore of WWE at that time. So, everybody was fighting to be in those two kind of main event slots, and nobody wanted to get left behind. The Ruthless Aggression Era, they're building up that they have a real strong class in developmental, which I believe is being started at the time in Ohio Valley. I'm pretty damn sure that's where, we had Cena, Batista, Randy Orton, Shelton Benjamin all coming on strong. We see them at the very beginning. I think they're going to play a very big part in the later pieces of this puzzle that get built into the Ruthless Aggression series. So we're not there yet. I don't know if we're going to go like in sort of time periods or if it's going to be like the Monday Night War where, episode 2 was on, I'm freestyling, but I think number 2 was on the NWO, number 3 was on DX, number 4 was on Mick Foley, number 5 was on Chris Jericho. So they're kind of just little documentary series pieces about that wrestler. But maybe they'll cover cards, or maybe they'll cover time periods of a couple of months. Maybe they'll cover something like that. We'll have to see where we go from here. But I'm pretty sure episode 1 and episode 2 are already up. So this was just episode 1. Make sure you go in your WWE Network, check this out, because even though the stories that they covered were things that have been beaten to death, mostly the WWE draft, which they showed people being drafted out of order. The Stone Cold Steve Austin story where he left in WWE, took his ball, and went home in 2002. And The Rock going to make movies. Those are the 3 things covered in this documentary. Very, very well. You had sit-down interviews with Bruce Pritchard, Hulk Hogan, Christian, Matt Hardy. You get words right from their mouth. And it's not like watching Eric Bischoff talking about WCW closing, and you have that, Monday Night Raw stage being built. The interview that they ran on every freaking DVD they could from 2002 until 2010. 8 years of the same thing being said every time, over and over and over again. So these mostly look like they're new interviews and more talking heads, but This looks like it's going to be a good series. Let's check this out.